Welcome to this Excel 2016 lesson on pivot tables. Pivot tables make it easy to rearrange data in a table without using formulas. The table from which you create a pivot table must have field headers, and there can be no cells with data next to the table. To create a pivot table, click a cell in the table. Then go to the Insert ribbon, and in the Tables group, there are two buttons here for pivot tables. One is Recommended Pivot Tables. Click this, and you'll get some suggestions for various pivot tables made from the data. Click on them to get a preview on the right. If any of these are to your liking, double-click on it, and the pivot table will be created instantly. If you don't find one that you like, you can click the Blank Pivot Table button, which will put a blank pivot table on a new sheet, and you can build it from there. I'll cancel this. Another way to go is to click the Pivot Table button. This will bring up the Create Pivot Table dialog. Here at the top it shows the range of cells that were selected. And down here you can choose to have the table created on a new worksheet or on an existing worksheet. By default it places it on a new sheet. I want to place it on the same sheet next to the original table. So click Existing Worksheet, then click a cell where you want it to appear. The cell will be the upper left corner of the pivot table, so make sure there's adequate room below and to the right for it. Click OK to create the pivot table. Now to the right side of Excel, a panel will appear where you design the table. You can move the panel where you want by clicking at the top and dragging it. The field headers from the table appear at this window on the top. Below, there are four windows where you can drag the fields to place them in the table. To have the fields arranged in columns or rows, drag them to the Columns or Rows window. Drag the fields that contain values to the Values window. If you want to use a field as a filter, drag it to the Filter window. I'll drag the Store to the Rows. Notice as you move the field to the windows, you can actually see the table being built. Now I'll drag Month to Columns, then Sales to the Values window. Notice in the Values window, it specifies that it will calculate the sales using the sum function. Now I'll drag Departments to the Filter window. That way I can filter which department I get the totals for. So now I have my pivot table. It has found unique entries in the fields and summarized them. Up here I have a drop-down for the department, so I can filter the data in the table by department. If I go to the department drop-down, I can filter which department is showing just by clicking on it. Then click OK. To have it show all departments again, I just click the drop-down and click All. Then click OK. The rows and columns also have drop-downs where you can filter out which item is showing. If I want only January and February showing, I just open the drop-down and uncheck Select All and check January and February. Then click OK. I'll change it back now by checking All, then press OK. For the first row fields, same thing. I can choose which stores are displaying, and I can also sort them ascending or descending. Some nice features in our table already, but let's face it, this table is ugly. Time for some formatting. Go to the Pivot Table Tools Design ribbon, then in the Pivot Table Styles group, I can choose a design. Or I can even create one. I'll choose one for now. I think I'll use this one. Now I don't like the column labels and row labels next to the drop-downs. And look how the first column here is wider than all the rest. This can be fixed by going to the Layout group, click Report Layout, then choose Show in Tabular Form. Now the columns are all the same width, and the drop-downs have field names next to them rather than column or row label. Now for the values. I want the amounts to show up as currency values. So right-click on any value, then click Number Format. This brings up the Format Cells dialog. I'll choose Accounting with 0 decimal places. Then click OK. That looks much better. And all that without using a formula. Now the really great thing about pivot tables is that after you've created one, it's really easy to change things around. All I have to do is drag the fields to the appropriate windows in the panel. To move a field out of a window, just drag it over to the spreadsheet. And it's gone. I'll get rid of this one also. Now I'll drag the month to rows and the department to columns. Then I'll drag the store to the filter. And there I have a whole new table. I can also select the table, then Control-C to copy it. Then paste it below the first pivot table by pressing Control-V. Then I could change around the copy. I'll drag the department to rows and the months to columns. One thing about pivot tables, if any of the data in the original table is updated, the pivot tables won't automatically update. I'll change some amount in the original table here. As you see, the pivot table stayed the same. To update the pivot, right-click on a value and choose Refresh. Or you could use the shortcut Alt F5. There, you could see the amount changed over here and down here. I'll change the original table back the way it was. Then right-click and refresh the pivot table. As I showed you earlier in the Values window of the pivot table panel, Excel used Sum to calculate the sales total. That's the default for Values fields, but there are other functions that can be applied to the fields. Right-click on a value, then choose Summarize Values By, and there are several functions you can use. I'll choose Average, and there we have averages. It displays average of sales at the top of the table, so you know what the values represent. I'll go back to the first table I made, and here's yet another way to display the totals. Right-click on a value and choose Show Values As. Some of these options are great for getting a better picture of the data. I'll choose Percentage of Grand Total. And now you see all the detailed values are a percentage of the grand total here on the bottom right. I'll right-click again, and this time choose Percentage of Row Total. And now the values are percentages of the grand totals for each month. I'll right-click again. Another good one is Rank Largest to Smallest. I'll leave the base field on Month and click OK. Now you can see which month had the most sales in each department. I'll right-click once more. Another one that's useful is Difference From. This will show how the sales went up or down according to what criteria you give it. I'll leave the base field on month, and for the base item, choose January. Click OK. Looks like sales went down since January on most of these. I could also see how other products did compared to the appliances. Right-click Show Values As. This time I'll choose Percentage Difference From and change the base field to Department. Choose Appliances for the base item. Click OK. And there's the differences in sales for the other departments. So those are a few of the options you have with Show Values As. Another way of getting to all these options is to right-click on a value, then choose Value Field Settings. Here at the top you can choose a custom name. This is the text that appears at the top of the table here. In the Summarize Values by tab, you have many more functions to choose from. And here's a Show Values As tab, which has all the options you had when you right-clicked. While I'm here, I'll change it back to No Calculation, so it shows the original totals. By clicking the Number Format button down here, you can format the values in the table. So by right-clicking and choosing Value Field Settings, you have access to all these options in one place. I'll click OK. Well, that concludes this lesson on pivot tables part 1. There's more to come, like grouping, slicers, and pivot charts, so stay tuned. Thanks for watching.